You have joined Max Minutes this morning, and we have a really exciting presentation for you with Ken Zeff and Tenicia Winston with Learn4Life. And I am Jackie Joyce with Career Rise. I'm on your Max board and co-chair Max Minutes with Amy Lancaster King, and I'm really excited to be here with you this morning. I want to be sure to share a special thanks to our anchor investors here and share with you a little bit about the agenda. So I'm doing our welcome and introductions, and then we'll have a great presentation from Ken and Tenicia about preparing students for success. We'll do a little bit of a Q&A, so be sure to have your thinking caps on, ask questions in the chat. We want to make sure this is very interactive. And then I'll close us out with a few things you need to know coming up from Max. So I'm excited to welcome our presenters from Learn4Life. Learn4Life is a regional partnership focused on improving educational outcomes and post-secondary success across Metro Atlanta. They bring together leaders from education, business, philanthropy, and the community to identify what's working, scale promising practices, and help ensure every student has the opportunity to succeed. So today I would love to welcome Ken and Tenicia from Learn4Life to share their presentation with you about preparing students for success in the K through 12 space. So Ken, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jackie, for the generous introduction. Great to see everybody. Let me actually offer just a moment of thanks of gratitude to all the work that you all do, because without positioning kids for career, all the work we do in K-12 is a kind of a road to just kids running in place. And so the opportunity that we're going to talk about today is really how do we get K-12 aligned with some of the work that we're trying to push forward in career. If we get K-12 right, we get career right. And so we're trying to create some alignment. And what we want to share is what we're learning at Learn4Life around what's happening in K-12, how kids are getting prepared, and where there's some opportunities. And so we think there's a lot of opportunity if we just get aligned, share some data about what kids need, then we can put kids on a better path for prosperity, not just for themselves, but for the region. So let me get into this here. Okay, so what are we going to do? Just a little bit about Learn4Life, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the landscape and what we're seeing right now, both in K-12 and that transition to post-secondary and how important post-secondary is. And then Tenicia is going to come back and talk about how we can reach back into K-12 to make sure that we're getting kids more prepared for workforce. Just a quick word about myself, and when Tenicia will come on in just a couple of slides and introduce herself. I've been at Learn4Life now really almost since the beginning, about a little over 9 years. Before that, I served as superintendent at Fulton County Schools, and I also sit on the Atlanta Board of Education. So I've been and I've got 3 kids who are products of Atlanta Public Schools and still in the system now. So very committed to this work as not just a person that gets up every day and thinks about it, but as a parent and a citizen of Atlanta. And so when we talk about the Metro Atlanta at Learn4Life, we like to focus on the 5-county region. There's lots of different ways to talk about what is Metro Atlanta, but at Learn4Life, we focus on the 8 school systems in these 5 counties. It's about a third of the kids in the state of Georgia. And just so you see what the demographic profile of those students is, about 80% students of color, and about 2/3 of our kids are economically disadvantaged. And just for folks who are not in K-12, economically disadvantaged, for a family of 4, that's when you qualify for the free and reduced lunch program. It's about $45,000, $50,000 a year in income to qualify to be in that economically disadvantaged number. And so what do we do at Learn4Life? Our lane is we are not a policy organization. We are a programmatic organization. We look for strategies that are having uncommon success with students who are traditionally underserved. We bring folks together. We pick those things apart. We find out where they're working, where are their conditions for success. And we really focus a lot on that third box, which is amplifying bright spots. But in order to do that, you have to understand the ecosystem that we're operating in. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about, because all of this stuff is interconnected. As we say, if anyone that's been to a Learn4Life presentation before, you've likely seen these gears of accountability that, depending on where you start, if you start at the business community, you look to colleges and say, hey, Colleges, why aren't you generating more graduates that can be prepared for workforce? Colleges say, look at high school. The kids who 50% of the kids that entered into our into our freshman class needed remediation. They weren't ready to be successful in college. They weren't prepared. High school says, well, you don't know the half of it. Our ninth grade class, half were reading on a fifth grade level. How could we be expected to prepare them? You go all the way down to early childhood. Early childhood says, yeah, we needed more seats, and they point back to the business community to fund and create tax base to make sure those programs are available for everybody. And what we have to avoid are these fingers pointing at everybody else. The idea is that we all have a role in this effort, and that is our collective responsibility. Because if we're going to create change, it's got to happen. It's not, we can't just fix one of these circles here, one of these people. We all need to realize that we are co-partners in this work. And so, there's a lot of reasons why we should be co-partners. And in fact, we make a huge investment in public education. About half our state budget in Metro Atlanta, it's $12 billion. 80,000 adults in Metro Atlanta work in those eight school systems in that 5-county area. So we are making a big investment as a community. And so the question then, of course, is, well, what are we getting for that investment? And what you see is by the metrics that we look for at Learn4Life, we have a lot of opportunity. We have a lot of opportunity to ensure kids are getting what they need. What you see is a system that's generally preparing about 40% of their kids. We focus on these 6 measures: K readiness, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation, and post-secondary success, because those are what the research tells us. If you get these right, these are strong indicators for the health and prosperity of a community. And what you see is there is a big spike up in high school graduation. We're very excited about that, and we can talk about that after the presentation. What it turns out, though, is that high school graduation is a relatively weak signal of education mastery. It is an indication of completion. It is not an indication that kids have mastered content, because by time, as you see, they get to post-secondary completion, only about 1/3 of our kids are graduating. So I'm going to spend just a minute. The way we've structured this, I'm going to talk a little bit about those early parts of the continuum, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tenicia to talk about the post-secondary transition to workforce, because I think that's the piece that is most relevant to the folks on this call. But it is important, I think, just to get a quick lay of the land of literacy and math that lead up to that post-secondary work, because it is all interconnected. So at Learn4Life, we focus on these dozen factors that contribute to kids not being able to read by 3rd grade. If you can't read, it's because of some combination of these factors. We actually zero in, our networks focus on those top 5, because we think those are the highest leverage. And so we're looking for bright spots in those areas. I'm not going to dive into that in this call, but we certainly, folks who are more interested in literacy, we can spend some time unpacking that in more detail. What you see basically as you disaggregate that 40% number, it's about a 40-point gap in what we call subgroups in K-12. So you basically, your white and Asian kids versus your kids of color, your low-income kids versus your kids of more means, you end up with pretty much a 40-point gap. And so if we're going to really move that number, we really need to focus on providing opportunities for our kids who are traditionally underserved. Similar story in math. There's a dozen factors of why kids aren't proficient in math. We've been focused on school culture, effective teaching, interventions for struggling learners. That's where we spend our time. And you see the same story, though, about a 45-point gap between as you disaggregate that 46% number, between kids who are from subgroups that have been traditionally underserved. Again, huge opportunity for us, but it helps us center our work. And the line underneath actually shows where we were in 2019. So what you see is, which is we look at that as kind of pre-pandemic. You see, we've gained most of we've made, we basically recovered from the pandemic, but where we were before the pandemic needed a lot of work. And so what this data shows us is that our work still has a ton of opportunity for 8th grade math. The reason we focus on 8th grade math, by the way, is that those 8th grade math algebraic skills are critical for success later on in the academic program. So, as folks know, life is algebra. Life is finding X, right? You get a little bit of information, you got to find the missing information. And eighth grade math proficiency ends up being a very strong signal of how kids are doing. And so if we can focus, if kids are prepared for eighth grade math, that opens the door to higher order math learning and ultimately to success, not just in high school, but in post-secondary. So we've been zeroing in on that metric. All right, so let's spend a second talking about post-secondary, which is the reason you all get up in the morning, because this is what prepares kids for workforce directly. So just pulling up this data again, what you see is, and hopefully that's not too surprising for folks. Well, hopefully it's shocking, but not surprising that so few of our kids are completing their post-secondary programs. It's not good for kids. They spend a lot of time, they spend a lot of money. It's not good for those post-secondary institutions because they've tied up a seat and haven't delivered the outcome they promised that they hope to deliver for those students. So why does post-secondary matter? There's, we have a little bit, is a conversation about, should kids go straight into workforce? And the answer, of course, is yes for kids that are oriented in that manner, but they still likely need some sort of post-secondary credential. And so when we talk about post-secondary, we think about that broadly. It is not just it's not everybody getting a poetry degree from Emory. All my Emory poets out there, thank you for your service. But it is about making sure that, if you were, as folks on this call know better than us, you need that post-second, you need some training to be effective in those career opportunities. And you see there is a dramatic increase in weekly earnings, and this is just not just 1 week, but this ends up being forever. So it puts you on a very different life trajectory when you have that signal to the workforce that you have that training. Also, you're more employable. And so you can see the relative employment rates by post-secondary attainment level. And then if we step out and look macro, we've got this big retirement boom coming up, and what we project in these key professions, and engineers, teachers, doctors, nurses, there's going to be a tremendous gap between those folks leaving the workforce and the needs that we have to keep our economy moving. This is national data from the Georgetown Center on Workforce. But it sees about a 4.5 million position gap. You have 18.5 million people leaving the workforce, only 13.8 coming in, and so we need to fill those roles in order to keep our economy moving. So when we talk about post-secondary, and this is where Tenicia will dive in a little bit more detail, again, we have there's a number of reasons why kids are not moving through and getting a higher completion rate. So I don't want you to think there's no silver bullets here. It's a collection of factors, and usually, if you're not succeeding, it's not just because of one thing. It's because a few of these factors have conspired to hold you back. We've been focusing on these four because we know that they're some of the highest leverage opportunities to improve outcomes for kids in post-secondary. So we found a few bright spots, and I just want to zero in on these before we dive into the career exposure work. We know there's a lot of challenges for kids to be able to afford their post-secondary work. We have this big gap between when kids finish high school and when they enter post-secondary, and there's nobody really in that gap. We hold K-12 and high school responsible for kids completing high school, but there is no preparation for college that's mandated or that schools are held accountable for in K-12. And K-12 and higher ed can't reach into K-12 easily and prepare kids for post-secondary, so we have a gap. And so there's a few nonprofits that we're big fans of that we see stepping into that gap and providing that support for students, especially our first generation students who maybe don't have those resources to fall back on in other areas. So we lift up One Gold Scholarship Academy and College of Eisenhower. I won't go into a ton of detail. They each have slightly different models, but in all cases, these are bright spots where nonprofits are leaning in to high school to meet kids where they are, to give them supports and resources, both academic, social, to be prepared to pull the funds to be successful in post-secondary. And so lots of good stuff happening there. And that's one area that we've spent a lot of our time on at Learn4Life. But the area that I think is holds the most opportunity, which is what we want to spend time with you all diving into some detail, is this matching interest and aptitude. This idea of what are kids good at, and how does that match with what the workforce needs. We think that we've overlooked those opportunities, and so we're going to share some data there. I actually think this is an uplifting story because it shows all the possibility that our students have, and so it'll help kind of rinse out some of the sober news that I shared. Tenicia is going to be our good news person as we head to the next section. So with that, Tenicia, who's our senior project manager, we're thrilled to have her on the team. Tenicia, why don't you introduce yourself, and I'll let you share.
Yeah, just replacing current share. Thank y'all so much for having us here today. I'm really excited to be discussing career exposure with you all. My background is I was a former elementary school teacher, then I transitioned, worked in logistics and distribution for a few years, and now I'm here at Learn for Life, and I feel like I get to kind of marry those things together, especially in this role around career exposure and talking about these roles that it's not that kids aren't interested in them, it's that they haven't been exposed to them or told what they are. Truthfully, before I joined a logistics and distribution company, I wasn't sure what that was either, and didn't know how many different career paths there are there. So as Ken mentioned, I get to be the good news person. So I'm here to talk to y'all today really about how we can match interest and aptitude for students to really maximize students' potentials and also fill that workforce gap that we know is coming down the pipeline. So, in a national survey, what was found is that over half of high school graduation or high school students didn't feel prepared for their next step. They were changing their college major at least 2 times and felt like they would have been better engaged in their learning in general if they had had a better sense of what their potential careers could be based on their aptitudes and what those would match with. They also didn't feel like their schools really regularly exposed them to the variety of career options. And that really lends itself back to what Ken was saying about that gap that exists in what we hold K-12 institutions responsible for versus what we hold higher ed institutes reliable for. And where is that gap for kids, and how do we ensure that there's more of a seamless transition? And we know that switching majors after your sophomore year reduces your graduation rates as well. And so we want kids to really understand what it is they are pursuing. So here at Learn for Life, our theory of change in this space is really to take students' aptitude results, and I'll dive into how we think about those in just a couple slides, and really address that gap in understanding between your aptitudes and how that matches with your career exploration and opportunities, because we think that that can then help fill that exposure gap, which will lead kids ultimately to pursue the post-secondary pathway that is the right fit for them. Ken, anything that you wanted to add here?
Yeah, I think that what's important here is that there are a variety of pathways to increase post-secondary completion, and I think we're just focused on this one area. So I don't want to say that I don't want people to walk away and say this is the only thing that needs to be done. This is, we think this is additive to the conversation, and especially for this group because this is workforce. But just no, we always think it's important that we look at the whole landscape, and then we care about a lot of stuff, but we're going to focus on one particular thread. And so as we dive into this work, I don't want people to think like this is the only thing that needs to be done, but if we can improve this, we can make a meaningful difference for kids.
Thanks, Ken. Yes. And so, as Ken was saying, in response to what we're hearing from the workforce community, we partnered with the Metro Atlanta Chamber to really understand and do a deep dive into the interests and aptitudes of our Metro Atlanta students. And what it uncovered is that we have plenty of talent here in our region. We are hearing from employers that the talent doesn't exist, our pipelines aren't here, and we have to keep recruiting. And so the good news is that the talent is here. What it does mean is also that there's an opportunity for us to have a coordinated effort between different sectors that could help develop and bridge that gap between students' aptitude and what they're currently exposed to and saying that they are interested in terms of their future careers. And how we get that interest and aptitude data is through U-Science. I'm not going to play the video today, but we will send it along to the Max Minutes team, so it will be available for y'all if you want to pursue and learn a little bit more about U-Science. But U-Science is a aptitude and interest test. It takes about 90 minutes. The state of Georgia pays for all students here to take this test. It is game-based, so it is truly aptitude. So it might show you a variety of triangles and tell you how many can you fit into a certain shape. So it doesn't directly correlate with standards for students, which is good. And we think that it, again, uncovers those natural aptitudes for students. And what it can show us is where our students' aptitudes lie. And based on students reporting, when you analyze the results with students, it creates a greater sense of self-awareness. They actually understand what are my natural abilities. It then makes them feel more empowered because they understand what do these skills in actually match with, right? What am I good at when I'm thinking about this test, when I'm thinking about how I like to work and how I do problem solving, what are those careers that I could go into? And then it will also take students and actually lay out what those career paths can look like. It will actually show them the average amount of school that you need, the type of degree for those careers, average earnings, the cost of those, where those colleges and opportunities exist. So it really lays out a nice map for them. And what we also find at a large scale is that aptitude is evenly distributed. This is a snapshot of the 5 high demand industries. And what we see is that our male and female students are showing the same aptitude in that gray bar for these careers. But our female students are lacking the interest and likely the exposure to this, because we know that your interest can be shaped socially and by your experiences and what you're told you should go into. And so this is why, again, this opportunity to expose students to those careers they have that natural affinity for is so important. So when we don't expose students, we actually lose that chance. And so while aptitude is evenly distributed, exposure and opportunity is not. And so this shows us those 5 high demand careers, and that orange number shows us what the opportunity gap is. So that's the difference between students that show interest in this career, or show both interest and aptitude, and students that have aptitude in this career.
Yeah, and I just want to add that this is a super optimistic slide, because these are actual kids in Metro Atlanta. So this is data from in the 5 county regions. This is not some estimate. We think there's a certain percent something something something. These are kids at, and Tenicia will break it down in just a few slides to give you a specific example. But just so folks have the appreciation, these are the 5 high demand careers that there are 5 of the highest demand careers that are out there that the state identifies. And we have kids that light blue, is that turquoise? I'm not super great with colors. The far left one. We have a lot of kids with aptitude here in Metro Atlanta. And these are kids who are in schools that are overlooked and they're under-resourced, and but yet they have these opportunities. They just don't know they exist. And so what Denise is going to provide a little more detail here, but I just want folks to start thinking about this it's a reframing of, oh, do we need to import a bunch of talent? Why? Or when we open up positions, when at starting positions, why are there no kids that show up? Nobody must have the talent. Well, the talent is there. We just need to activate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ken. Yes. And so I'm excited to actually drill down into architecture and construction with you all and share really that student level data that we can really dive into, that school level data with you science that it empowers us to do. So here with architecture and construction, I have drilled down to just three specific high schools here in Metro Atlanta. We have Cobb County schools represented and also Fulton County schools, but we have a North Fulton School and a South Fulton School. And why I picked these schools is one, that they have a ton of students with aptitude, but they also have really large exposure gaps. And so that presents that opportunity to introduce these kids to architecture and construction, because we can then further drill down because now we know what schools we're targeting. And these are all different types of schools. And so the messaging may need to be different between them. But again, that opportunity for employers to lean in here and for us as adults in this space to lean in and actually say, hey, have you ever thought about this? And actually spend our time in a place where we're seeing, around 100 kids that actually have this aptitude in the field, rather than just going in and doing general panels and hoping that we have students. We know that those students are actually sitting in the audience, they're in this building, that talent exists, and we just need to start activating those. And this is where we can really drill down. So we've taken this slide, and so this is how we are thinking about career exposure. We know that career exposure for high school students exists on a continuum. There's learning about work, learning to work, and learning at work. Where Learn4Life, where we are taking this work and where we have piloted our bright spot work in this space, is really trying to think, how can we give students experiences at businesses and on site to really move it along the continuum, take them out of just the school related activities and push it up just a slight notch. So it's not as heavy as a touch as work-based learning or pre-apprenticeships or internships for students, but it is really that next level that requires just a bit more mentoring space, but it's still that light touch, because right now the goal is really to get those students and raise that interest rate along with their aptitude so that those two numbers are more evenly matched.
And I think I really like this slide or this framework, and hopefully everyone in the webinar is looking at this and finding themselves somewhere here, somewhere on this continuum. And just recognizing that, while we all love pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships, like we know that those are really life-changing opportunities for students. It takes a lot. That triangle at the bottom shows you how much energy it takes and how much investment. And so we've been really focused. Well, when those should happen, and we're excited about them, but we've really been focused on this experience exposure at business, to give kids that window into what those worlds look like. And I think we can do those more at scale. And Tenicia's got an example coming up that helps to show what one provider or one corporate citizen is doing. But I would challenge us all to think about kind of where we are on this and how does this fit into the continuum, because I think there's an opportunity to do some more work at scale. At lighter touch than maybe we are pursuing right now. But you want to talk about the great example?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, and also that I think Ken brought up a really great point, that all of these things, these are not in competition, and Learn4Life, to Ken points, is not saying that we only need to focus on experience. All of these are complementary to one another. So excited to share our work with Grady's Teen Experience and Leadership Program. The shorthand is TELP. And it is an 8-week experience for high school students. They take nearly 600 students from 150 schools across Metro Atlanta. And they are able to send them and offer a variety of rotations. You all are familiar with Grady. They have everything from that like behind the scenes desk work, that paperwork and filing, and IT, all the way to being in the surgery room. And so there's a variety of places kids can find themselves in healthcare sciences within Grady. And by integrating new science, it allowed for Grady to place our students in more intentional rotations, and actually help them match them with their aptitudes and naming that, hey, have you ever thought about doing this? This is where we see you. This is why we see you here. This is why we want to sign you up for this rotation. Because students go through 6 different rotations throughout the summer. And after integrating new science into the program, what we heard from students is that they actually left feeling like they had a clearer picture of what the next step in their career path needed to be, and actually what are some of those action items they need to take. Because now we're taking the concept of just talking about what it looks like to be a surgical resident, and we are actually allowing students, as you can see from our photo here, to actually see that hands-on work and see what does that a day in the life look like, and actually spend some real meaningful time with the folks who are actually working in that space. And so with that, we wanted to wrap up, but we wanted to make sure that we could summarize all of what we shared. We want you all to leave on a high note, and that we know that post-secondary completion, it's essential for our collective long-term prosperity, and we all have a different role to play in helping increase that number for our students. Also, that for our students' next step outside of post-secondary, that they have the talent, and our role as adults is to make sure that it is actually identified, and we are the catalyst for them taking that next step, and that we can be really intentional to expose students to these high demand careers to help both them and also the larger workforce needs here in Metro Atlanta. Ken, do you want to lead us through some follow-up questions?
Yeah, and I want to be I want to be a little selfish here too, because we are still building out these, we're meeting with the chamber to help build out some of these exposure opportunities. And so we want to hear from you all too about that's why this first question, your reaction, is to get a sense of where you think what are some of the holdups? And I see there's some questions in the chat that we'll get to in a second. But we're really eager to know what it's going to take to move from your perspective to get as many kids in exposed to career in their K-12 experience, because we believe that if we can get kids exposed early in a way that at scale, that we can help to unlock this aptitude interest gap that can meet the long-term needs of not just what's good for Atlanta, but what our kids deserve. So I guess with that, let me turn it over to our fearless leader, Jackie, if you want to guide us forward.
Yeah, happy to. Well, thank you all so much for your presentation. I love data, and so seeing all of the data points and helping it kind of tell the story and better understand all of the minutia within this discussion has been really helpful for me. We've had a couple of questions come through the chat and the Q&A box. So for our guests, make sure that if you have additional questions or if something in this Q&A sparks another thought, make sure that you're sharing it in the Q&A box or sharing it in the chat so we can make sure to keep the conversation going. But one of the things that came up in the Q&A box was that youth science and other aptitude programs can definitely be a useful tool. Unfortunately, the feedback from teachers and schools is often around not having enough time in the day to allow kids to meaningfully complete the test and explore the careers available. Are there any recommendations or work happening around this issue that you guys are aware of?
This is a great question. It's something that we've experienced ourselves. I've experienced it actually in two places. My son, who's a sophomore at Midtown High School, took U Science, and they sent us about a month later, I got a one-page printout that said that he likes computers. And at the time, he was upstairs building a computer with his friends in his room. So I knew that thing, but no counselor ever talked to him about it. Nobody actually sat down and helped him map out the opportunity. And so there's the opportunity for counselors who are dramatically overstretched to make this useful. There's also we've all taken the U sides. I took it myself. It's about a 70, just so folks realize it's about a 75-minute assessment, and there was a little more detail in here that we didn't get to about the assessment. It's provided free by the state. You just have to take it one time during your high school experience, or you can even take it at the end of middle school, because your aptitudes don't really change, and it's a bunch of puzzles. And when I took it, it said that I had a career. I was well situated for a career in medicine. That I had, the attributes that would prepare me for a career in medicine. I'd always been interested in medicine. There are no doctors in my family. There are nobody in the medical profession, and so I think maybe it didn't come up that said you should lead a scrappy nonprofit in Metro Atlanta. It didn't give me that information. But had I had that information about medicine, maybe early in my career, or earlier in when I was putting on the sorting hat and figuring out which direction to go, or maybe even had a Grady opportunity, maybe I would have taken a different route. That's for me to lament someday with anyone that wants to join me for a cold drink and to sit back in the chair and think about. But the reason why I think what's at the heart of the question is not necessarily that we can't find 75 minutes for students to take this test and ask teachers to make time to take this test, is that we're not generating any value from it. And this is what drives parents crazy about assessments in general, is when we have kids sit down and take an assessment and yet we don't do anything with it. And so then it's just like, well, the kid took the time, the teacher took the time, we sacrifice instruction, and we're not any smarter because of it. We haven't done anything with it. And so what the challenge, I think, for K-12 is not necessarily to find the time, although that is always a challenge, but then to actually demonstrate value that we're using this tool. And I think the Grady example is a really good example of using of deploying that tool and demonstrating value. So Tenicia, do you want to talk about how Grady uses the tool in their process?
Yep. So the slides that I shared around how we can drill down really to that school level to think about where are those highest leverage, like opportunity gaps.
Flip to that slide just to put it up on the screen.
See if I can go backwards. Nope, it's going forwards. Okay, here we go. And then what Grady did with this, so what we can do with this is actually then say, okay, we're going to go and so we're all going to put our imagination. We're going to say this says healthcare sciences now, and we're drilled down here. And so we go into these schools now. So now we've done the recruitment here. But what Grady did then is actually license U Science for their students, and it was part of their onboarding then to take it so that Grady then had the individual student results, easy access at their hands, and then they can take charge. And what the Learn4Life team as a backbone did is actually then help them work through the matching and what those conversations with students would look like to say, hey, we're actually intentionally signing you up for these specific rotations. Now that we know that Ken has an affinity for this, we're going to actually put him, in the operating room.
Radiology versus social work versus billing. There's so many different functions that a large system will complete.
Exactly. So I think there's somewhere in between of showing the value, as Ken was saying, to K-12, and then some of the immediate responses we can take right now while still getting that value from U Science, and working to untangle that.
So I mean, the goal I think is if we can we haven't been pushing our systems to. I think it's about half, a little less than half of our systems take advantage of U Science right now. We've been hesitant to say every student should take U Science until we can start demonstrating the value. And so that's really the work ahead of us, is to show that, hey, because of this tool, good things can happen for kids, because otherwise we're just taking away instructional time. And if parents are just getting one piece of paper that says your kid's good stuff, but nothing happens because of it, we haven't we haven't moved the conversation forward.
Well, I think that is a great segue into our next question, because it's asking about ROI. So the question is there data that shows what the best ROI is in terms of career exposure, like guest speakers, field trips, experiential skill challenges, etc.? Do we have any data about like what has the biggest ROI?
It's a good question. Thank you for flipping to this. So the 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 way we think about it is how do you know we know we don't have a big enough sample size yet of unlocking of the exposure opportunities and having those turn into career. Those are things that are just coming online now. The data from the Grady program is that kids are more likely to enter into careers in medicine after experiencing the Grady program. I think what the answer is, I think we need to do as much as we can for as many kids. Hopefully, the if we get the exposure opportunities right, we can scale those at a much. We can touch many more kids than the apprenticeship programs. But the truth is, we want to do it all, and so it's really, I think, up to each organization to figure out where are you best suited to enter into this conversation. And so the answer is, I think we want to do as much as we can for as many kids, um, and not necessarily trade off between the two. I don't know, Cece, if you want to add.
Yeah, and I would also add that we don't see that any of these have to be you as an organization have to pick one of these lanes to live in. There could be an entry point, and then you want to graduate into that pre-apprenticeship because through the experiences, right, we know that even if we send kids into these roles where they have aptitude in, kids can have aptitude across multiple different of these five high demand careers. You could have both one in computers and technology and healthcare sciences. And so by giving you that lighter touch experiential opportunity actually on site before we get to that work-based learning and pre-apprenticeship actually could be very beneficial for both the student and for workforce's time investment because to Ken's point, those experiences are a lot lighter touch and shorter. And so letting a kid experience that for somewhere between 2 and 8 weeks is a really good chance for us to say, should we continue further down this path with this student, or do we need to switch and look at those other aptitudes that you have and try this out in a different high demand career field because they will find their place somewhere. And so before they've invested and then now enrolled in those post-secondary courses, and then they find out, oh no, I enrolled in nursing. I don't actually like blood, which is a real story we hear from our friends over at Clayton State. And they go, okay, well, we have to now pivot, but now we're a sophomore in college. So we want to think of this as, trying to get kids in here, but ultimately, obviously, getting them those deeper touch experiences as well. So they all work and play together.
Yeah, it's getting to this. This is one of the key challenges of K-12 and workforce is that it takes investments in K-12 or can take a while before they show up in the workforce. But that's why this data point that Tenicia mentioned earlier about major changing is something we're tracking as a leading indicator. Do you want to go back to that slide, Tenicia? It's that, yeah. So what you see is, if half kids are changing majors, so the implications of that is that it lowers your graduation rate, takes more time to graduate, you spend more money, and that happens. So this we think is a leading indicator back to your ROI question, because it is hard to predict like, well, you had a successful career because you did this, that's going to be, we're going to be waiting a while. But we think that that's an indicator that we can look at like Tenicia's point, like, or if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be an accountant, and then you actually see what those things are, and they connect with you early. After an exposure opportunity or some experience in K-12, your switching costs are quite low. You have not taken a bunch of prerequisites. You have not taken made investment in one major at a college. Now you have to backtrack to get a whole bunch of majors in another, or a whole bunch of coursework and prerequisites in another course. And so we can lower that's an indicator we're going to watch. But I do take this back is like we have to come up with clear arguments about the ROI for something that's many years down the road. And so it's a good push. So thanks for raising that.
And I think there might be a different kind of ROI at different stages, right? Like when students are younger, and just starting to think about where might they want to go in their careers, more of the, you know, job shadowing or more of the like videos or somebody coming to talk to them in their class helps them start forming the ideas of where they might want to go. And so that at that stage of their career exploration might have the largest ROI. But when they're then starting to really think about, okay, I'm ready to take on that the job in my career, probably the actually exposure of being in the role, being with the employer is going to have the largest ROI there. So it might kind of depend on where the student is within their exploration journey. That helps determine what the return on investment is.
Yeah, and then the question for us is how do we measure that at scale? And so
Mhm.
how do we, because I think you articulate exactly the right, it's that student thought process is a little tricky to make because I understand folks, all these things, all those things on that one slide about apprenticeships and exposure that costs money, that costs an investment by business. And so how do we tie that to outcomes? I think that's an open question for us, but it's something that we know that because of data like this that's on this slide, we know it matters.
Yes. Awesome. So another question that we had was, what do you advise for students that graduate a year earlier from high school that can benefit from knowing how to be intentional and understanding how to develop their career interests for success?
So good for kids who
Good question.
graduate. Let's not bury the weed. That they're obviously doing something right. I think it is for me. It comes down to I have a rising senior right now. It comes down to really understanding what those opportunities are, what that student is interested in, what are their passions and what are their aptitudes. So if they're not sure, then seeking out opportunities. And I think this is our collective challenge: is how do we create those opportunities for kids beyond, especially for kids that come from environments where there is maybe not a lot of accountants and doctors and lawyers running around, or they don't have access to those. So I think what I would encourage them to do is either get to their counseling office at school and see what opportunities that they have for to get plugged in, and reach out to folks like Career Eyes and other folks on this call who are looking to place ambitious students in opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question we had in the chat was, I would like to inquire whether you observe any correlation between the household circumstances and the student's ability to participate in identifying potential opportunities.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead, Tenicia.
Yeah, so we know that some of these exposure opportunities, right? There is likely a trade-off for students, or there may be depending on how we structure them. And so that is a question as Learn for Life, as we continue to build these opportunities, we want to think about and be intentional because we know that some of our students um, who would benefit most from this experience are going to also need to earn money during the summer, or at least not lose money by going to these experiences. So when we're thinking about building these, and as we are talking to organizations, really thinking about how are we getting kids transportation and how are we expecting them to show up? What is that distance? Are there MARTA cards that are available? What does that look like? Is there room for some type of stipend so that there isn't that trade-off of that regular job that I needed to keep? Or is it that we think about the amount of time kids are spending in these opportunities? Because these don't have to be full-time roles. We've seen partners do this in ways where kids work for anywhere from 10 to 20 hours in these career exposure opportunities, which then leaves them that time to still work their other part-time jobs if needed. So there's just different ways to think about the structure and supports that kids need. Even things as small as like providing lunch for kids on site, things like that. Ken, anything else?
I mean, it's the whole you've nailed the whole question though, and this is creating access where these gaps are happening are in schools that are under resourced opportunities to explore. And I would just so there's I think Tenicia outlined a bunch of ideas. I would just frame this as this is an adult problem, not a kid problem. And so how do we, the adults, create pathways for kids who have been underserved and under-resourced to get the exposure? And we have to, and I think the argument is that this is a bit of self-interest for the adults. If we're going to fill the talent gaps that we have to answer this question. If we're going to those widening bars of kids who have aptitude and not exposure, married with these workforce gaps that we have, this is the path forward. And so we're going to have to lean in here in creative ways, and maybe ways that we think that we're going above and beyond what we're required to do to create opportunities for kids, because that is our collective responsibility to create pathways for those students. So great question. There's going to be a bunch of different answers, but I think it starts with us recognizing that it's our responsibility.
All right, thank you so much. And the last question from the chat that I'm going to take is, what role do or should parents play in these conversations? Parents play a big part, right, in a lot of
Um,
students' decisions and where they go, what they do. And so I'm curious, is there anything that you guys are starting to think about as you guys are thinking about exposure opportunities for students and engaging parents as well?
I think I was gonna say, I think should is doing some heavy lifting in that question when we think about it. I think when we think should, the answer is absolutely parents should be part of this conversation. Parents should not just receive that single page printout. We want to be inclusive of parents in these conversations and ensuring that they have understanding of their student aptitudes. As we're building exposure programs, that's something for us to think about of the involvement, because we also don't want the barrier for students to be parents either, and unlocking that, because we know that parents also are doing trade-offs to have different conversations, and their time is also very valuable and important. So I think it is a both and in this, is that we should be building opportunities for students and looking for ways to include parents. Ken, as an APS parent, what else would you add?
Do you have can you go back to this slide with the 5 industries, the high demand careers?
Yes. One more, I think.
Yeah,
Nope. There we go.
no, one more, just to show them.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one. So the adolescent brain is not fully formed. Any parent knows this. It's a very narrow frame of reference. They focus on very much the today, as all the brain science, and especially for boys, like it's hard to see deferred happiness. I think it's our job as both parents and adults in this larger system to lead kids towards their aptitudes, to make it clear to them that interests are great, but if we want to position you for long-term success, to have financial freedom, to have economic opportunity, and also to build the Metro Atlanta that we need, this idea of all of these, if you are good at these things, and maybe you don't know what distribution logistics is, that can be tricky. If you don't know what architecture and construction looks like, beyond maybe just 5% of it. Our job as parents, and I would say our job as a community, is to to push our kids and create opportunities for kids to access these opportunities, because it won't just change the trajectory of what we need in Metro Atlanta. It'll change the trajectory of a child's life. It'll put them on a path of economic freedom and choice. And I think we do them a disservice if we don't tell them, if we withhold from them something that they're very good at, that can be an unlock for them. And so it's not easy, but I think that's our collective challenge.
I love it. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I really appreciate the time that you guys spent putting all of the information together for us, the time that you guys took answering all of these questions. In 30 seconds or less, because I still have a couple of things Max related, what is the key takeaway that you each would like our audience to walk away with today with?
I would say that our students are whole and complete, and it is our role as adults to start unlocking their full potentials and providing those opportunities.
Yeah, this is fundamentally an optimistic argument. This is an asset-based position. We have the talent here in Metro Atlanta. We have the ability to fill opportunities that we need as a community, not just for today, but for tomorrow. It's our collective responsibility to create opportunities for students to see that in K-12 and know that if we're going to build the kind of Atlanta that our kids need and our society deserves, we got to lean in and take this on as our collective work. Thank you,
Mhm.
Jackie, for creating this opportunity. Thank you all for being a part of. I know we're preaching to the choir with a lot of this work because this is what you get up every day and do. So thank you for spending a few moments and diving into some of this data. And as I think Jackie mentioned, we'll make sure that whatever channels that Jackie shares this out, we'll get to. And we're happy to engage at Learn4Life, and I'm sure our contact information, Jackie can send that out too. You can find us, we're around. That if anyone's interested, any of the employers out there are interested in diving into how we can create opportunities for your students and build some of this structure, some of this infrastructure out that we're working with the chamber on, we're happy to engage you in that conversation too.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. This was a great presentation. All right, we're going to wrap up with a couple of max items left to do. So, if you aren't already a member of Max, you can scan this QR code. This is just one of the offerings that Max provides. There's a lot of opportunity to learn more about workforce development, learn best practices. So, if you aren't already a member, check us out, see what else we have to offer to you. Upcoming activities we have with Max, our next Max Minutes is August 28th, and it will be with Shay Watkins of Braven, thinking about the impact of social capital on workforce development. And then we have the Leadership Max class of 2027. The application round opens on August 2026, so the details will be coming out very, very shortly, so stay tuned with that. And then we also have an opportunity on October 14th with Centennial Yards for a Max Talks. That'll be from 11:30 to 1:30. So stay tuned for the opportunity to sign up to attend that as well. And as always, a very special thanks to our anchors, and a very special thanks again to Ken and Tenicia for their presentation today, as well to all of you that participated in our webinar with great questions, great engagement. Really appreciate you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your Friday.